Have you ever witnessed a moment so powerful, so unexpected that it sends shivers down your spine? Picture a run-down classroom in a forgotten corner of the city. Paint peeling off the walls, a single flickering light overhead, and a sneering teacher hovering over a trembling student. Only this time, the tables are about to turn in the most spectacular way imaginable. In this story, a poor black girl is ruthlessly mocked for daring to hold a violin. But what no one realizes is that hidden behind that battered case and her quiet demeanor lies a musical prodigy about to set the world on fire. The small city of Glenwick had its charms, though they weren't always on display in the weathered halls of Winston Middle School. It was one of those public institutions that struggled to receive funding, ensuring that the lockers were forever stuck on their hinges. The cafeteria food was less than appetizing, and the teachers were often more stressed than enthusiastic. On this particular Tuesday morning, a thin drizzle smudged the windows, painting everything grey. In a dimly lit music classroom at the far end of the hallway, Miss Theodora Gleason, known as Miss Theo, was prepping for class. Her face was etched with perpetual disdain. She had grown jaded from years of teaching disinterested students. At 47, she was more concerned with collecting her paycheck than inspiring young minds. She wore her bitterness like a second skin, meticulously groomed hair and sharp suits that were overshadowed by the acrid aura of condescension emanating from her posture. Students trickled in one by one. Among them was Naomi Walker, a lanky 13-year-old black girl with large, curious eyes. She wore second-hand clothes, and her shoes were frayed around the edges. Naomi tried to shrink into the background. She was well practiced at fading into the walls after a lifetime of being overlooked and underestimated. But Miss Theo's gaze was like a hawk today, sharp and punitive. It all started with a slip of paper on Miss Theo's desk. The principal, Mr. Garvey, had circulated a memo. Winston Middle School's annual Talent Expo was coming up, a modest event aimed at boosting student morale and maybe netting a small donation for new instruments. The staff was encouraged to suggest students who might participate. Miss Theo rolled her eyes. She disliked the Talent Expo. It meant extra work for her. She had little patience for the off-key amateurs. Just then, Miss Theo noticed Naomi rummaging in her tattered backpack, where something metallic glinted violin strings, half concealed by a carefully folded cloth. The teacher's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. She remembered hearing a rumor. Naomi came from a poor family, lived on the outskirts of Glenwick. Took the public bus an hour every day just to get to school. The rumor also mentioned she liked classical music, an odd choice for someone from her background, Miss Theo thought dismissively. The teacher's voice cut through the chatter. "Naomi," she said, making no effort to soften the call. Naomi's head snapped up. "Bring that violin of yours." The class tittered. They had seen Naomi occasionally humming songs or reading music sheets but never performing publicly. Miss Theo's tone was mocking a show of her habit for singling out the vulnerable. Naomi swallowed. She wasn't prepared to reveal her violin in front of the class. This instrument was her sanctuary, the one precious possession that used to belong to her late grandfather. But refusing a teacher's instruction in Winston Middle School was never wise, especially Miss Theo's. So Naomi rose, heart pounding, and walked to the front with her scuffed violin case. The teacher's eyes glowed with a twisted pleasure. She tapped her foot impatiently, as though expecting the worst. Naomi opened the case with trembling hands. The old violin was unassuming, its wood dulled by time. A hush fell over the class as Naomi gently ran her fingers along the strings. It wasn't just a tool to her, It was an extension of her soul. But Miss Theo merely cleared her throat dismissively. "Give us a tune, dear. Let's see if you can make more than just squeaky noises." As Naomi closed her eyes to muster courage, a storm of emotions swirled within her. Fear, doubt, shame, but also a flicker of defiance, though she tried to hide it, because deep within, she knew she held a gift no one expected. Still, with Miss Theo's cynical stare and the snickering classmates, Naomi wondered if she could find the strength to show the world what she was truly capable of. The next day dawned damp and cold. Naomi had spent the night practicing in her cramped bedroom, nestled in a tiny apartment where the walls were thin and the neighbors yelled at all hours. Her mother worked the graveyard shift at a local diner, trying to keep food on the table, so Naomi was mostly alone. The violin kept her company. She played quietly, mindful not to disturb the family next door, and poured her heart into each note, dreaming of a future far away from Glenwick's looming shadows. At school, the corridors were buzzing with talk about the Talent Expo. Posters were taped to the walls, and cheerful letters spelled out, "Showcase your talent, music, dance, poetry, and more." Naomi, hugging her violin case tight, tried to slip into her seat in homeroom without drawing attention. But Miss Theo had other plans. Attention. Everyone, Miss Theo announced to the class during the morning period. "I have selected a few of you to represent our homeroom in the upcoming Talent Expo." She read off a list of names, all the while ignoring the eager hands of those who wanted to volunteer. This was her moment to dictate. Then she paused for dramatic effect, leveling her eyes on Naomi. And Naomi Walker. She'll be playing the violin. A wave of snickering washed over the room. Some were from the usual bullies who found humor in Naomi's poverty. Others were from kids who had heard Naomi only pluck strings softly during practice breaks and assumed she was incompetent. Naomi felt her cheeks burn, unsure whether to feel embarrassed or outraged. One of the more brazen boys, Jamal, piped up. "Yeah, let's see how that squeaky violin can measure up against real music." He was referring to the popular pop-singing group of girls also performing at the expo. Miss Theo's thin lips curled. Now, Jamal. Let's give Naomi a chance." Besides, she shot Naomi a pointed glance. "We can't judge how atrocious it'll be until we hear it." Naomi felt a knot tighten in her stomach. It wasn't just the ridicule. It was the fact that she suspected Miss Theo chose her intentionally for mockery, to set her up to fail in front of the entire school. What better way for the teacher to amuse herself? Naomi wanted to refuse to shrink back into obscurity. But a small, stubborn spark of courage burned inside. How many times had people looked down on her? How many times had her mother urged her not to give in to despair? As the class ended, Miss Theo handed Naomi a pamphlet. "Here are the guidelines," the teacher said curtly. "We need you to pick a piece, something that doesn't run too long." Then, with a sly twist of her mouth, she added, "I'm sure you're aware that we have limited patience for mediocrity." Naomi looked down at the pamphlet, her heart racing. She had no illusions about Miss Theo's intentions, yet a part of her, the part that cherished every sweet, trembling note of the violin, saw an opening, an opportunity to let people finally hear what she could do. The possibility that they might reject or mock her once again was daunting, but Naomi couldn't suppress the flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd surprise them all. That afternoon, on her way home, Naomi stopped by the Glenwick Public Library, a small building that carried more dust than books. She asked the librarian for any classical pieces she could borrow. She discovered a binder of sheet music for Mendelssohn's Violin Concerto in E minor, left behind by a local music enthusiast. Intrigued, she remembered her grandfather often spoke of this piece's emotional depth. Determined, she decided that she would work tirelessly on it, despite the fact it was advanced, because that's what she did, best strive for excellence, no matter how many times life tried to trip her up. On the walk home, with her heart pounding in her ears, Naomi whispered to herself, "I can do this. I have to do this." She felt an invisible weight on her shoulders, expectation, mockery. Her mother's struggles, her own fragile self-confidence. But as her fingers touched the violin case protectively, she remembered that the best melodies are born from raw, genuine feeling. Little did she know the choice she made would set off a chain of events that none of them could have predicted. In the small apartment she called home, Naomi sat at the only table they had, a repurposed wooden piece her grandfather had built years ago. The corners were splintered, the top worn. It was nothing special to anyone else but to Naomi. It was a piece of history, a reminder of the unconditional love her late grandfather, Marcus Walker, had given her. He was the one who introduced her to the violin. Marcus had been a janitor at the esteemed Juilliard School in New York City. Although he never attended as a student, he spent his breaks peeking into rehearsals, absorbing the music like a thirsty sponge. Over the years he saved up money and bought a used violin at a pawn shop determined to learn. He never became a professional, but he managed to pass on his passion to Naomi. Every Friday night before his health declined, they'd sit in the living room practicing scales and simple songs. He once told her, "Music is the one language that can't lie, Naomi. Let your heart speak through those strings." Now, years later, she gazed at that weathered violin, remembering every note they played together. She was practicing for the Talent Expo, going through the challenging sections of the Mendelssohn Concerto. Occasionally, she would stumble the complexity far beyond the little folk melodies she'd learned. But each mistake fueled her determination to perfect it. Outside her door, the sound of footsteps interrupted her reverie. It was her mother, Stacy, returning from the late shift at the diner. Exhaustion radiated from her posture as she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter. She forced a tired smile at her daughter. "You're up early, baby," Stacy said, checking the wall clock. "That piece sounds fancy. It's for the Talent Expo next month. I'm playing in front of the whole school," Naomi answered, trying to hide the uncertainty trembling in her voice. Stacy's eyes widened in pride and concern. "I wish I could be there, but you know I have my shifts." She sighed. Money was tight and every moment of paid work was crucial. "But oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. I know how beautiful you can play." Naomi's throat constricted. She wondered if her mother would still be proud after hearing about Miss Theo's cruel motivations. But she didn't mention the teacher's sarcasm. She would handle it alone. She was used to carrying heavy burdens by herself. She resumed her practice once Stacy retired to her bedroom. The notes filled the apartment, swirling through the cramped space with a surprising richness. Naomi had a natural gift for expression. She made that violin sing, even if the technique needed polishing. Hours slipped by as she repeated measures gliding from the haunting opening melody to the fiery runs. The music seemed to transport her away from Glenwick, from her mother's constant worry, from her classmates' mockery, from Miss Theo's malicious smirk. The night before the next school day, Naomi lay in bed, with her mind replaying the melodic lines of the concerto. She visualized each shift of her fingers on the fingerboard, each stroke of the bow. She knew that the performance for the expo was only 3 weeks away, and every moment of practice mattered. That same night, in a different part of town, Miss Theo was busy grading papers in her tastefully decorated home. She stumbled upon the Talent Expo roster. Naomi Walker's name stared back at her. With a sneer, the teacher scribbled, "Violin." Probably dreadful, but oh well, next to Naomi's name in red ink. She felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. If the girl made a fool of herself on stage, it would reinforce Miss Theo's low expectations of her, and in some twisted way, reaffirm the teacher's long-standing prejudice. Yet Miss Theo had no idea of the raw, unpolished brilliance Naomi possessed. She had no clue how the notes of Mendelssohn would rise from the battered violin, with a power that transcended social status poverty or a teacher's scornful disbelief. And so as the city lights flickered off, two souls in Glenwick unknowingly set themselves on a collision course. One, a jaded educator who had lost the spark of compassion long ago. The other, a young dreamer forging each note with hope, ready to pierce through the darkness with music no one expected from a poor girl living in a cramped apartment. In the following days, the buzz about the Talent Expo grew louder throughout Winston Middle School. Posters were updated daily with fresh names and time slots. The handful of popular acts, the cheerleading squad's dance routine, and a trio of pop singers dominated hallways with excited chatter. Meanwhile, Naomi quietly refined her concerto. Her practice did not go unnoticed. During lunch break, Naomi usually kept to herself, finding a quiet corner in the music room or the library to study her sheet music. She was so engrossed one afternoon that she didn't sense another student approach until a gentle tap on her shoulder startled her. It was Lydia, a shy girl with braces who played the clarinet. Naomi knew her only by sight. Lydia was as much of an outcast as she was. "Hey," Lydia said softly, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I heard you're playing the violin for the expo. That's pretty cool." Naomi managed to smile. She rarely had friendly conversations at school. "Thanks. Are you performing?" Lydia nodded, her cheeks coloring. "Yeah, the band is doing a short medley of movie themes, but they put me in the back row." She shrugged. "Anyway, I overheard Miss Theo talking with Mr. Salazar, the principal's assistant. She was basically saying she doesn't expect you to do well and that you'll probably embarrass yourself. I just wanted to warn you." Naomi's eyes widened, and a sinking feeling churned in her stomach. It was one thing to suspect Miss Theo's malice, but hearing it confirmed made it sting. Thank you," Naomi stammered. "I guess I'll have to prove her wrong." Lydia offered a supportive nod. "I know how it feels to be underestimated. For what it's worth, I hope you do great." Then she hastily departed, leaving Naomi alone with her thoughts. During the next music class, Miss Theo began to pressure the Talent Expo participants to rehearse in front of everyone. She stood at the front, arms crossed, an air of superiority thick in the room. "Let's see. Jamal, you and your group will present your hip-hop routine. And Naomi, we need a quick preview of your violin piece. We need to see if it's even presentable." Naomi gripped her violin case. She had practiced countless hours in private, but performing in front of a hostile class was another story. Her stomach flipped. She took a deep breath, removed the violin from the case, and positioned it under her chin. Miss Theo tapped her watch. "Anytime, Ms. Walker. We haven't got all day." A hush fell over the students. Naomi began to play the opening bars of the Mendelssohn, her bow gliding delicately across the strings. It started soft, trembling slightly with her nerves. But as she reached the lyrical passages, her tone blossomed, filling the classroom with a plaintive, stirring melody. Some students who had been ready to laugh suddenly found themselves captivated. Even those who were determined to sneer had to pause. The music was undeniably beautiful. Naomi had just begun to lose herself in the depth of the concerto when Miss Theo abruptly clapped her hands. "All right, that's enough." The teacher's voice sliced through the reverie. "We get it. You can string a few notes together." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the class. Some actually wanted to hear more. Naomi lowered her bow face, flushed. She looked at Miss Theo, who only offered a perfunctory shrug. "Work on your timing, Miss Walker. Now, Jamal, you're up." As Naomi took her seat, her heart pounded. She caught glimpses of a few classmates staring at her with something that looked like admiration. But Miss Theo's dismissive attitude still stung. It reminded Naomi that the teacher had control over how much or how little the rest of the class heard. She thought of Lydia's warning. This might be a deliberate attempt to keep her from polishing her best performance in front of her peers, leaving them unaware of her true potential. Despite the teacher's interruption, Naomi felt a rush of confidence. She had seen the surprise in her classmates' eyes. They expected squeaky, off-tune fiddling. Instead, they glimpsed something deeper, more compelling. Maybe if she could harness that moment on the day of the Talent Expo, she could win them over entirely and prove Miss Theo wrong in the process. But unknown to Naomi, Miss Theo had a few more tricks up her sleeve, determined to ensure that the poor girl with the violin wouldn't shine too brightly. 2 weeks before the expo, Miss Theo implemented a strict pre-screening. She announced that every participant must audition after school to confirm their piece was expo-worthy. On the surface, it sounded like a fair measure for quality control. But for Naomi, it felt like yet another hurdle. Those who do not pass this pre-screening will not proceed to the main performance, Miss Theo declared with a sweeping glance around the room. "We have standards." Her eyes lingered on Naomi, practically daring her to fail. Naomi decided she would do her best at the audition. She felt that she might not be perfect, but she had improved enormously. Her mother even noticed the leaps in her confidence. Every day after school, Naomi devoted hours to practicing in the cramped apartment. Her fingers ached, her arms tired, but she never gave up. She was determined to master each phrase of the Mendelssohn, to let every nuance resonate with heartfelt emotion. The day of the pre-screening arrived, and Naomi entered the auditorium with her violin case. The stage was empty except for a single chair under a spotlight. Miss Theo sat in the front row, flanked by 2 other teachers, Mr. Diaz from the English department and Mrs. Sinclair from history. They were presumably there for a more objective assessment. Naomi stepped onto the stage. The auditorium's silence pressed in on her like a physical force. Under normal circumstances, she might have quivered with stage fright. But she had come too far to let intimidation rule her. She positioned the violin under her chin, took a calming breath, and began. The opening notes flowed. Naomi poured every ounce of passion she had into the concerto, each measure weaving a tapestry of longing and hope. She lost track of her surroundings. Her eyes half closed as the music guided her. Even Mr. Diaz and Mrs. Sinclair seemed transfixed. They exchanged impressed glances. But just as Naomi soared into the piece's most dramatic passage, a sudden buzzing erupted from the speakers. A high-pitched feedback shriek ricocheted through the auditorium. Naomi nearly dropped her bow in fright. She halted mid-phrase confusion, overshadowing her musical trance. Hold on," Miss Theo scolded, shooting an annoyed look at the stage crew booth. "What is that noise?" 2 timid 8th graders who operated the sound system for the audition nights scrambled to fix the feedback. "Sorry, Miss Theo," one boy stammered. "The microphone settings are messed up. We'll try to fix it." Naomi tried to remain calm, but her heart was racing. She was in the zone, and the jarring interruption threw her off balance. She looked toward Miss Theo, hoping for a chance to start over. The teacher sighed dramatically. "All right, Naomi, from the top." "Quickly." Naomi began again, but this time her nerves were on edge. A few bars in the feedback screech returned louder than before. She cringed her fingers, slipping on the strings, producing a scratchy note. Miss Theo threw her hands up. "This is ridiculous. We can't even hear her properly." She turned to the other teachers. "Perhaps we should just conclude that this piece is too advanced for Naomi right now. She's clearly struggling to stay in tune under pressure." Mr. Diaz cleared his throat. "Well, we haven't really heard her unimpeded these technical issues." But Miss Theo overrode him. "I've heard enough. Naomi, you're unprepared to handle the demands of this piece. It's not fair to hold up other participants just because you think you can tackle advanced violin concertos." A rush of protests died in Naomi's throat. She could feel her eyes stinging with tears, not just from the frustration, but also from the humiliation. Was Miss Theo sabotaging her on purpose, messing with the sound system? The 8th graders at the control booth were known for their competence. It was suspicious that the equipment chose this exact moment to malfunction repeatedly. As Naomi left the stage, gripping her violin case like a lifeline, Miss Theo recorded a note in her folder. "We'll decide if you can still participate after we see how the rest of the auditions go," she said. But the finality in her voice suggested a decision had already been made. Naomi practically ran out of the auditorium, tears burning her cheeks. She had poured so much effort into perfecting her performance, only for it to crumble due to faulty speakers. Or was it sabotage? That evening, she locked herself in her room, feeling the weight of defeat smother her. She couldn't shake the sense that Miss Theo's plan was to bar her from the expo altogether. If that happened, all her hard work, her dreams, her chance to finally shine would be stolen. Yet as she stared at the violin, she remembered her grandfather's words about music never lying. He had also told her that true talent and passion eventually find a way to be heard. With a shaky determination, Naomi decided she wouldn't give up. She had one last chance to appeal and prove she was ready for the main event, even if Miss Theo wanted her to fail. She just needed the right moment and perhaps an unexpected ally. In the days following the disastrous pre-screening, Naomi found her spirits at an all-time low. She brought her violin to school each day, though Miss Theo offered no new updates. The teacher acted as though Naomi was invisible, focusing on the other acts for the expo, but the rumor mill was active. Some students whispered that Mrs. Theo deliberately messed with the sound system to sabotage Naomi. Others, influenced by Miss Theo's scathing remarks, believed Naomi just couldn't handle the difficulty of the music. The rest were simply entertained by the drama. Late one afternoon, as Naomi headed to her locker, she found Lydia anxiously waiting for her. The corridor was nearly empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. "Naomi," Lydia said in a hush, "you need to hear this." She handed over a small USB drive. I volunteer in the AV club sometimes. I can't say how I got this, but just trust me. It might help you." Naomi blinked in confusion. "What's on it?" Lydia's eyes darted around nervously. "It's footage from the auditorium's security camera during the pre-screening. You'll see for yourself. I'm sorry if it's none of my business, but I think you need proof that something was off that day." Before Naomi could respond, Lydia scurried away, leaving her alone with the USB. Her heart pounded. Could there really be proof that Miss Theo sabotaged her audition that night? Naomi waited until her mother left for work. She grabbed her old laptop and plugged in the USB. The security footage showed the stage from a high angle, capturing Naomi's audition. Her performance started smoothly, but the feedback soon disrupted it. Naomi watched closely, rewinding the footage. At the moment, the screech first occurred. A figure was at the control booth, fiddling with knobs. It wasn't just the 8th graders. Miss Theo was there too, leaning in, pressing something on the sound panel moments before the noise blared. Naomi's stomach twisted in outrage. Miss Theo had caused the feedback on purpose. She clicked to the second moment, and again, Miss Theo's hand moved suspiciously right before the ear-splitting screech. The teacher's facial expression and almost smug satisfaction was unmistakable, even from the grainy video. Tears of anger welled up. Now she had proof that the sabotage wasn't just paranoia. But what could she do with it? If she confronted Miss Theo directly, the teacher would likely deny everything, maybe even retaliate further. Naomi needed a plan, someone trustworthy to show the evidence to. She thought of the principal, Mr. Garvey. He was known to be strict, but fair. Yet he and Miss Theo were colleagues. Could she trust him to act impartially? Then again, letting Miss Theo get away with sabotage felt like letting every bully who ever looked down on Naomi win. The next day, Naomi decided to approach Mr. Garvey during lunch break. She asked for a private meeting in his office. The principal, a tall man with a stern face but kind eyes, listened quietly as Naomi explained the situation. Then she handed him the USB. Mr. Garvey inserted it into his computer, watching the footage with an increasingly grim expression. This is very serious," he finally said, sitting back in his chair. He steepled his fingers deep in thought. "Miss Theo is a tenured teacher here, and these actions, if proven, are a breach of professional ethics." Naomi's anxiety spiked at the word "if." "The footage is clear," she insisted. "It's there you can see her messing with the knobs." Mr. Garvey exhaled slowly. "I see it. I won't deny it. But addressing this properly requires discretion. We don't want a spectacle. Let me handle it." A knot of apprehension formed in Naomi's chest. She had no choice but to trust Mr. Garvey to do the right thing. As she left his office, her mind swirled with doubts. Would he confront Miss Theo? Would she be disqualified anyway from the talent expo? The only reassurance she had was the principal's parting words. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Naomi, I'll see to it you get a fair chance to perform, no matter what." That evening, for the first time in weeks, Naomi felt a glimmer of hope. She resumed practicing with renewed vigor, carefully dissecting every measure of Mendelssohn until her arm ached. If given a fair stage, she was determined to leave the crowd speechless. Little did she know the evidence was about to set off a storm, one that would expose Miss Theo's cruelty to more people than even Naomi anticipated. The following morning, Winston Middle School buzzed with unusual tension. Word spread that the principal had called Miss Theo into an urgent meeting. Although no one knew the reason for certain rumors, abounded from budget cuts to scandalous misconduct. Naomi tried to keep her head down. She wasn't sure how the conversation with the principal was going behind closed doors. But halfway through first period, her nerves got the better of her. She ducked into the girls' restroom and splashed water on her face, wishing she could skip directly to the moment this whole ordeal would be resolved. She returned to class only to be summoned to the principal's office over the PA system shortly after. Her heart hammered. Students turned to stare as she stood, violin case resting against her desk. She took it with her as though it were a talisman for courage. Inside the office, she found Mr. Garvey seated behind his large desk, looking more serious than ever. Miss Theo was also present, arms folded, her expression dark with anger. Naomi stepped in, quietly closing the door behind her. "Have a seat, Naomi," Mr. Garvey said gently. She sat conscious of Miss Theo's cold glare. "Miss Gleason." Mr. Garvey began pausing to choose his words carefully. "Has provided her explanation for the events during your audition. She claims there was a simple technical error. However, this footage," he tapped the computer screen where the security video was paused, mid-frame, "raises serious questions." Miss Theo's voice trembled, a veneer of false composure. "I was merely trying to fix the feedback. I was concerned about the student's performance, but I never intended sabotage." Naomi's lips parted to protest, but the principal held up a hand. "Naomi, as I promised, you'll get a fair chance to perform at the Talent Expo. I've overruled any notion of disqualifying you. Additionally, a separate faculty member, Mr. Diaz, will oversee all sound checks to ensure no further technical errors occur." He shot Miss Theo a pointed look. "Is that clear?" Miss Theo's eyes blazed with indignation, but she nodded stiffly. "Of course." In the interest of fairness, Mr. Garvey continued, "I'll also be informing the superintendent of these events. Any further action," he paused, carefully framing the next words, "will depend on the results of a more thorough investigation." Naomi's pulse thundered in her ears. On one hand, relief coursed through her that she was still in the expo. On the other hand, Miss Theo was in deep trouble. Naomi had longed for justice, yet now that it was materializing, she felt strangely uneasy. Exposing Miss Theo might lead to potential backlash, not just for the teacher, but maybe for Naomi herself, from students who liked Miss Theo, or from the teacher's colleagues. When Naomi left the office, her heart was heavy, but determined. She had fought for her chance. Now all that remained was to deliver a performance that would shatter every doubt. Over the next week, the atmosphere around Miss Theo shifted subtly. She still taught the class, but her scathing remarks were muted. Perhaps the fear of an ongoing investigation kept her in check. Some students noticed the shift speculating behind her back, but she still carried a simmering resentment towards Naomi. If any doubt remained in Naomi's mind that Miss Theo regretted being caught, it vanished whenever their eyes met. Her stare was chilling. Meanwhile, the Talent Expo's final preparations charged the entire school with excitement. Students roamed the halls with costumes and props, rehearsing lines or practicing dance moves. The day before the expo, they held a dress rehearsal. Naomi was assigned a late afternoon slot, so she used the morning to finalize her piece's transitions. Lydia caught up with her in the library, heard the news. "You get to play after all," she whispered, beaming. "I'm so glad." "Are you nervous?" Naomi forced a small laugh, terrified honestly. "But also excited," she exhaled. "I've never performed in front of so many people. It's scary, but it's my dream too." Lydia nodded, her braces glinting in the overhead light. "I'll be rooting for you. If you can move people the way you moved me during practice, you'll blow them away." With that heartfelt encouragement, Naomi headed to the auditorium for the dress rehearsal. The stage was bustling with students, teachers, and the newly appointed sound supervisor, Mr. Diaz, who was calibrating the microphones and speakers. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she took the stage. She placed her violin under her chin and with Mr. Diaz's nod of approval, she began to play. She'd learned from the fiasco at the pre-screening. She refused to be rattled by the environment. Instead, she channeled the swirl of emotions, her frustration, her desire to prove herself, her longing to make her late grandfather proud straight into the music. The auditorium was nearly empty, save for a few drama club members and a couple of teachers, but even they seemed captivated by the plaintive notes of Mendelssohn's opening. When she finished, Mr. Diaz applauded politely. He approached the stage, offering a gentle smile. "That was impressive, Naomi. Let's check your levels." He tapped the microphone near her. "I think we need to adjust the distance to capture your violin without feedback, but you did beautifully. No sabotage this time, just honest feedback." Naomi's chest swelled with gratitude. For the first time, she felt an adult at school saw her potential without bias. As she stepped off the stage, she glimpsed someone lurking near the side curtains. Miss Theo Arm's crossed eyes hardened, watched her with a look that was hard to interpret, somewhere between begrudging awe and cold hostility. Then the teacher turned on her heel and left without a word. Naomi exhaled. In less than 24 hours, she would face the entire school and possibly some local press who attended these events for community coverage. It was her moment to lay bare her soul through music. She only hoped that the weight of Miss Theo's anger wouldn't crush her spirit on the big day. Little did she know just how dramatic that performance would be, or the extraordinary fallout it would create. The day of the Talent Expo dawned crisp and clear, a welcome change from Glenwick's usual drizzle. Sunshine warmed the grounds of Winston Middle School, as though nature itself was offering Naomi a token of encouragement. A sizable crowd gathered in the auditorium. Students, teachers, family members, and a few local community reporters who occasionally covered school events. Backstage, the energy was electrifying. Performers dashed about, adjusting costumes, fixing makeup, or warming up. Naomi stood in a corner, a silent bubble in the storm of excitement, carefully tuning her violin. Her hands trembled less today. A calm resolve settled over her. She had endured sabotage, scorn, and prejudice, but now, at last, she would play on her own terms. The show began with the cheerleading squad's dance routine, an explosion of pom-poms, bright smiles, and loud music. The audience cheered and whistled. Then came the boy band with a spirited rap performance, the drama club with a comedic skit, and the clarinet ensemble playing a medley from Harry Potter. Each act earned applause, some more enthusiastic than others. All the while, Naomi waited listening from backstage, gently flexing her fingers to keep them nimble. Finally, an MC took the stage, scanning a small card. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special performance. Naomi Walker will be playing the violin. Let's give her a big round of applause." A spattering of polite claps resonated through the hall. Naomi drew in a breath, stepping onto the stage. The spotlight felt blinding at first, but then she saw the outlines of the crowd. No matter. She reminded herself of her mother's unwavering support, of her grandfather's guiding spirit, and of her own hours of hard, dedicated practice. She placed the violin beneath her chin, let the hush settle in, and drew her bow across the strings. The opening notes of Mendelssohn's E minor violin concerto floated into the auditorium, timid at first, but gradually gaining richness and depth. A wave of silence washed over the spectators. They seemed glued to the unfolding tapestry of sound. In the front row, Mr. Garvey watched with a mix of pride and tension. Next to him, Miss Theo sat stiffly, arms folded tightly as though bracing herself for a train wreck. But as Naomi's playing soared, even the teacher's rigid posture seemed to falter. The concerto's main theme, a poignant, longing melody, embraced every corner of the auditorium. No squeaks, no stumbles, just pure expressive music. For Naomi, time blurred. She poured her heart into every phrase, letting the violin sing of her struggles, her dreams, her heartbreak, and her hope. The notes flowed effortlessly from muscle memory, honed by hours of perseverance. Each shift up the fingerboard felt like stepping toward a destiny she always knew was hers. When she finished the first movement's final cascade of notes, the audience erupted in applause. Some stood cheering. Naomi blinked in astonishment, chest heaving. She could barely process the ovation. It felt surreal, as though she were still dreaming in that cramped apartment, imagining the day she'd be recognized for her music. She offered a small bow, tears pricking her eyes. This was more than a performance. It was a triumph over every voice that said she couldn't, every prejudice that told her she wasn't worthy. In the front row, Miss Theo remained seated, but her expression was thunderstruck. The color had drained from her face. Mr. Garvey, noticing the teacher's rigid stance, leaned over and spoke something in her ear, though Naomi couldn't catch the words. All around, people buzzed with excitement, some proclaiming how unexpected it was, others praising the raw talent they'd witnessed. Naomi left the stage to a chorus of cheers, her heart buoyant. In the wings, Lydia and a few other classmates rushed to congratulate her, their faces lit with astonishment. "That was incredible," Lydia exclaimed, giving Naomi a gentle hug. But in the midst of the celebratory chaos, Naomi spotted Miss Theo standing off to the side, arms at her hips, glaring at her with a mixture of disbelief and a deepening sense of alarm. For the teacher, it seemed this public display of Naomi's brilliance was not just a blow to her pride. It was an undeniable testament that her bigotry and sabotage had failed spectacularly. Little did either of them know the night was far from over. In the crowd sat a local reporter from the Glenwick Times, scribbling notes feverishly. And as the final bows were taken, an unexpected wave of consequences would crash down on Miss Theo, revealing that karma can strike with a force no one sees coming. The Talent Expo concluded with roaring applause, a final curtain call, and a wave of exhilaration that had teachers and students alike buzzing. Naomi barely had time to process the congratulatory remarks from classmates and strangers who approached her backstage. Her mind was still floating in the euphoric realm of performance, where each note seemed etched in her memory. In the crowd, a man in his 50s wearing a tan sports coat and carrying a small notebook sought her out. He introduced himself as Julian Peters, a reporter from the Glenwick Times. "That was a remarkable performance," he said, smiling warmly. "Mind if I ask you a few questions for an article?" Naomi blinked the request, catching her off guard. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded shyly. "Oh, okay. Sure." Mr. Peters asked her about her background, her practice routine, her piece choice. Naomi answered as best she could, occasionally glancing around to see if Miss Theo was lurking. After concluding the brief interview, the reporter thanked her and congratulated her once more. He left muttering something about this being the story of the night. An hour later, as the audience trickled out, a hush settled over the nearly empty auditorium. Stagehands dismantled props and stowed equipment. Students hugged in farewell. Naomi, packing her violin, overheard a heated conversation behind the thick curtain. "I told you, Theodora, it's out of my hands now," came Mr. Garvey's measured voice, though frustration tinged its edges. "The footage was conclusive, and the superintendent wants a formal investigation. You could face suspension, possibly worse." Naomi froze, heart racing. She shouldn't be eavesdropping, but the mention of Miss Theo's name paralyzed her. She edged closer to hear better. "You can't do this to me," Miss Theo hissed. "I've dedicated 20 years of service to this school, and you're going to throw me under the bus because of one misunderstanding." Mr. Garvey's tone hardened. Sabotaging a student's audition isn't a misunderstanding. And that's not the only complaint we've received. Students in your class have stepped forward, claiming you singled them out and humiliated them. You've crossed too many lines. This time there will be consequences. Naomi's stomach knotted. A part of her felt a strange pang of pity for Miss Theo, as though she were a wounded creature lashing out. But the teacher's anger and malice remained a potent reminder of why this was necessary. Emerging from behind the curtain, Naomi saw Miss Theo fling her arms in desperation. The older woman's eyes flashed with a storm of bitterness. When she noticed Naomi standing there, her expression contorted. For a moment she looked as though she wanted to hurl insults, but Mr. Garvey's presence forced her to remain silent. Instead, she turned on her heel and stomped off. Mr. Garvey gave Naomi a gentle nod. "You did well, Naomi. Congratulations. I'm sorry you had to see that confrontation, but you deserve to know that your courage in coming forward was the right thing." Naomi mustered a grateful smile, though her emotions were in turmoil. She knew Miss Theo's downfall was the teacher's own doing, but it still felt surreal. Nonetheless, a sense of justice glowed within her. Finally, someone stood up for students like her. The weekend arrived, and the Glenwick Times published a feature titled "Young Violin Prodigy Astounds" at Winston Middle School Talent Expo. The article mentioned Naomi's breathtaking performance in glowing detail. It also contained a brief mention of the sabotage allegations and the ongoing investigation into Miss Theo's conduct. A wave of local interest ensued. Neighbors who once ignored Naomi in the hallway now recognized her face on the front page, giving her respectful nods. Friends of her mother texted and called, sharing how proud they were of Naomi. Even Stacy's boss at the diner offered to adjust her shifts so she could support Naomi's music aspirations more easily. On Monday morning, Naomi arrived at school to discover Miss Theo's classroom was locked. Rumor had it she was placed on administrative leave, pending the results of the investigation. In the hall, Lydia ran up with excitement. "Naomi, did you see the article? And guess what? Principal Garvey wants you to play at the end-of-year assembly." Naomi's heart fluttered. The end-of-year assembly was a bigger affair than the talent expo drawing parents, alumni, and sometimes local dignitaries. If she performed there, it could open even more doors. She felt tears well up, not of sadness, but overwhelming gratitude. Yet amid this newfound recognition, Naomi remained grounded. She spent her lunch break in the music room quietly practicing. Each note reminded her of the journey she had taken from a small apartment with paper-thin walls to center stage, from being mocked in class to being celebrated in the newspaper. That afternoon, Mr. Garvey pulled Naomi aside. "We've received a call from a youth orchestra in the neighboring city," he said, handing her a flyer. "They saw the article and are offering you a chance to audition for their summer program. Full scholarship if you qualify." Naomi's eyes nearly popped out of her head. A scholarship to a real youth orchestra. She stammered her thanks, emotions tangling in her chest. Before she could say more, Mr. Garvey patted her shoulder. "I'll help you any way I can, Naomi. I'm proud of you and I believe in your future." And so with Miss Theo's day of reckoning, served, Naomi discovered that what began as an attempt to humiliate her ended up catapulting her towards opportunities beyond her wildest dreams. But for Miss Theo, rumor had it that the board's formal inquiry was only beginning, and the teacher who tried to tear down Naomi Walker would soon face a fall from grace she could never have anticipated. A few weeks later, Winston Middle School hummed with end-of-year excitement. Finals were underway. Yearbooks were being signed, and everyone buzzed about the upcoming assembly. For Naomi Walker, the assembly would be her next grand stage, a chance to showcase not just her talent, but her resilience. Miss Theodora Gleason remained absent from the school. Different rumors floated. Some said she was considering an early retirement. Others claimed she was fighting the allegations tooth and nail. A letter from the school board was expected any day, deciding if her tenure would be revoked. But for Naomi, the teacher's presence had become a ghostly memory. She still felt that pang of bitterness whenever she walked past Miss Theo's empty classroom, remembering the sting of humiliation. But she also felt a sense of closure. In the end, Miss Theo's cruelty had backfired spectacularly. On the morning of the end-of-year assembly, the sky was as bright as Naomi's spirits. She arrived early, violin case in hand, greeted by Mr. Diaz and Lydia, who both offered encouraging smiles. The auditorium was decorated with balloons in the school colors, the stage set with a podium and rows of chairs for speakers. The concert piano was moved to one side, and a microphone stand was positioned at the center. Backstage, Naomi paced mentally, rehearsing every note. She had chosen a shorter, more accessible piece this time, an arrangement of Beethoven's Spring Sonata. It was cheerful, yet still intricate enough to showcase her technique. She wanted to leave the crowd with a sense of hope and renewal. As the assembly commenced, Principal Garvey took the stage first, delivering a speech about the challenges and triumphs of the school year. Awards were given out for academic excellence, sports achievements, and community service. The audience clapped politely, occasionally erupting in boisterous cheers. Finally, Mr. Hawuru Garvey announced, "Today we have a very special musical performance. Please give a warm welcome to Naomi Walker." The applause that greeted her was far more robust than she'd ever experienced before. Naomi stepped onto the stage, taking a moment to absorb the crowd, teachers, students, parents. Among them sat her mother, Stacy, who managed to secure time off from the diner. Stacy's eyes glistened, her smile radiant. Naomi felt a surge of gratitude, recalling the nights her mother worked herself to exhaustion, just so Naomi could have a chance. She lifted the violin, letting the hush settle. Then she began. The opening melody of Beethoven's Spring Sonata danced through the auditorium, a lilting tune that felt like sunlight on budding flowers. Naomi's bow strokes were fluid, her intonation pure. This time there were no fears of sabotage, no overshadowing malice. She played with a joy that radiated from the stage, enveloping every ear in the room. When she drew the final note to a lingering close, the explosion of applause took her breath away. She stood there, overwhelmed, tears of happiness sliding down her cheeks. In the front row, her mother rose in a standing ovation, joined by countless others. Naomi bowed deeply, heart pounding with triumph. This was it, the moment she'd always dreamt of. After the performance, as the crowd dispersed, a representative from the youth orchestra approached Naomi. A warm, middle-aged woman introduced herself as Madame Rothstein, the director of the Glenwick Regional Youth Orchestra. She smiled broadly. "I've heard extraordinary things about you, Naomi. Your audition tape was impeccable, and seeing you live today just confirmed our decision. We'd like to offer you a full scholarship for our summer program. We believe you have the potential to go far, perhaps even Juilliard someday." Naomi's eyes widened in disbelief, her breath catching. A full scholarship," she echoed. Madame Rothstein nodded. Absolutely, dear. Your passion for the violin is evident. We'd be honored to have you. Stacy joined them, tears brimming. She embraced Naomi, beaming. Baby, I'm so proud. She managed her voice, trembling. You did it. Naomi swallowed hard, pressing her cheek against her mother's shoulder. She thought of her grandfather who once mopped floors at Juilliard, but never lost his love for the violin. She wondered if he were watching, feeling that same pride. As they left the auditorium, the final vestiges of Miss Theo's cruelty felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the brilliance of Naomi's promise. In the days that followed, the school officially announced that Miss Theo had resigned effective immediately. While the teacher's future remained uncertain, Naomi's was blossoming before her eyes. The Glenwick Regional Youth Orchestra awaited, and beyond that, who knew? Perhaps a scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory, perhaps a professional orchestra seat one day, or a stage in front of international audiences. The possibilities spread before her like a boundless horizon. And so in a story brimming with drama, sabotage, and last-minute redemption, it was the music that triumphed. For Naomi Walker, the poor black girl once mocked by a bitter teacher, the violin had become more than a challenge. It was her voice, her refuge, and her triumphant bridge to a life she'd long dreamed possible. Naomi's journey from the battered violin in her cramped apartment to standing ovations in the school auditorium is a testament to the power of resilience, talent, and unwavering determination. No matter how relentless the mockery or sabotage, the truth found its way to the surface, proving that genuine passion can outshine prejudice every time. If Naomi's story touched your heart, imagine how many other untold stories of hidden brilliance and quiet perseverance exist all around us. These moments can become beacons of hope for countless others, standing on the sidelines, waiting for a chance to be heard. Thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. If you believe in the strength of the human spirit and the magic of music, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more uplifting stories that remind us all of our limitless potential. Your support helps keep these powerful narratives alive.